What is going on, guys? It's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another PS4 news update video. This is something I'm going to maybe start doing every so often, just kind of covering some of the other developments going on in the PS4 jailbreaking scene, other than just new potential exploits. Just some of the other developments, some other news that's going on around the PS4 scene to give you guys a bit of an update on what's going on. So, the first thing we have for today is the Cbomb issue has been fixed by Sony. They've actually fixed it in the latest 9.00 update. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what Cbomb is, I made a video on it a while ago showing how it could be bypassed on a jailbroken PS4, but for retail PS4s it was a serious problem because essentially what happened is that if your CMOS battery died in your PlayStation 4, now the CMOS battery is the little lithium battery that keeps the internal system clock counting even when power is cut to the PS4, so that when you reboot the PS4 it'll still be at the correct date and time even if you've not resynced your time with PSN. So if that CMOS battery dies and you don't have access to PSN, let's say the PSN store gets shut down in the future, as it was going to be done with the PS3, the store was going to be shut down. Obviously it's been kept alive due to kind of backlash from the community, but that is only a kind of temporary decision, so it probably will be shut down fairly soon for the PS3. When that happens for the PS4, you won't be able to resync the clock from your PS4 to PSN and get to the right date and time. And the reason that that's a problem is because there was a security measure in place on the PS4 where if your clock was reset and it was not synced, then it would not allow you to actually launch any of your PS4 games, whether that's a physical game or a digital game. It just wouldn't work. It would just kick you back out to the menu and give you an error code. And this was done for a really stupid reason. It was to stop you from unlocking trophies while your clock was out of sync, because then it would give you the wrong date and timestamp of when you actually unlocked the trophy if your clock was wrong. So that is why they stopped you from launching any games, which is utterly ridiculous. But that is essentially, what was going on there. Now, to be fair to Sony, this probably wasn't deliberate. They probably just did this as an oversight and didn't realize it before it was too late. So obviously this wasn't really an issue right now because the PSN store still existed. So if your CMOS battery came out or your CMOS battery died and your clock got reset, you could just reconnect to PSN and you'd be good. It would resync. But of course, if PSN got shut down in the future for the PS4, which it will eventually do, then you wouldn't be able to resync it and your console would essentially become e-waste and it would be unusable. You wouldn't be able to launch any of your games unless it was jailbroken, obviously. So yeah, they've actually fixed it. They've actually listened to the community for once, which is amazing to see. Now, what they've done is they've essentially allowed you to be able to launch your games as they should have done in the first place. But when you unlock a trophy, it will not record the timestamp of the trophy if your clock is out of sync, which is fine. At least you can run your games. That's what's important. And you can still unlock trophies. It just doesn't show the timestamp, which is very similar to unlocking trophies with the Trophy Unlocker homebrew app from the Dark Programmer on a jailbroken PS4. It doesn't record the timestamp from when you unlock the trophy, which is essentially just now what happens if your clock is out of sync. So yeah, pretty handy. You can still unlock trophies and you can still run your games. So even if PSN gets shut down in the future and your CMOS battery dies, you can just pop a new CMOS battery in or just leave the dead battery in. Either way, you'll still be able to run your games. All is well. So yeah, that's really awesome that PlayStation, Sony actually addressed this and this is no longer an issue. Now, hopefully Microsoft can address some of the issues that they also have. Microsoft's not innocent in this either, and we'll have to wait and see if they correct their mistakes as well. So yeah, let's wait and see. Okay, so moving on, the next piece of information I have for you guys today is that RetroArch is getting an official port for the PlayStation 4 for jailbroken PS4s, which is another huge piece of news that is very important. Now, for people who don't know, a lot of people seem to think that, there was no RetroArch for the PS4. That's not the case. There has been RetroArch support for the PlayStation 4 for jailbroken PS4s for a few years now. Thanks to a user called OsirisX who ported RetroArch unofficially to the PlayStation 4, and it's actually a very stable, well-made port of RetroArch that works perfectly well. So why even make an official one? Why not just use that one as your official port of RetroArch? Well, the problem with that one is that the official RetroArch team, LibRetro, couldn't really acknowledge that unofficial port for the PlayStation 4, mainly because it used source code from Sony. It used the leaked SDK from Sony to create that unofficial version of RetroArch, and therefore LibRetro simply could not support it, could not acknowledge it because of that copyright issue. Whereas what they're doing now with this official version is that they're using the new tools created by people like Crazy Void and Dewey Dog and Spectre and all the other people who worked on the OpenOrbis toolchain, which is essentially an open source SDK for the PS4, which does not use any of Sony's copyrighted code in there, as well as other sort of open source projects for the PS4 on GitHub. So RetroArch contributors like Francisco here and Franger are taking advantage of that to build an official RetroArch port for the PlayStation 4, which they will be able to, have on their website and support, which is great because the issue with the unofficial one, even though it's a great port of RetroArch, it's not really being kept up to date by Osiris X. Obviously, he's probably a busy guy. He's got other things to do. So it's not being kept updated. So I believe the latest version of the unofficial one is like version 1.8.8 or something, whereas the official version of RetroArch is, above 1.9 now, I think. So yeah, because of that, that's one of the only kind of real issues, is that it's not really getting supported, whereas an official one will be supported with regular updates and improvements over time. So that is great to see. And it's also great for the PS4 homebrew scene in general, because, obviously having a big group like LibRetro creating an official port of RetroArch for jailbroken PS4s, it kind of legitimizes jailbroken PS4s more. And it also makes it so that, obviously there was a lot of people back in the day, a lot of hackers and exploiters who didn't want to really work on creating new jailbreaks for the PS4 because they saw it as, it only really being used for piracy, jailbroken PS4s, because there wasn't a lot of homebrew development being made. So they didn't really want to contribute with trying to create new exploits for the PS4 if all it was going to be used for was piracy. Whereas now, obviously, with something as big as an official RetroArch port, definitely, kind of proves to more hackers and people trying to create exploits that, the homebrew scene is alive and well on the PS4. It's definitely going to start growing, and it may also attract more homebrew developers to the PS4 scene when they see an official RetroArch port for jailbroken PS4s by the LibRetro team. So very good news indeed for PS4 homebrew. So the next thing we have to talk about are PlayStation 4 emulators. Now, we had the Orbital emulator, which was showcased years ago, back maybe 2018 or 2019, quite a few years ago. We had this kind of Orbital emulator, and it wasn't accessible. It was just more of just a screenshot or the developer showing, some of the menus working on the PS4, very, very early stages. But last week we got a new release of Spine, which is a PS4 emulator that runs on Linux. And it's actually pretty impressive. It is very early days, so obviously there's a lot of problems with it. It's not going to run, God of War or Ghost of Tsushima, but that is the ultimate goal eventually, in a few years potentially. But right now it's capable of running some kind of 2D games, as well as a few 3D games with some issues like, Sonic Mania and others. But obviously it's very early days. There's a lot of graphical issues in pretty much any game that you try and run right now, and most games are not even playable, especially, 3D games, more complex games are not playable yet. But this is very early stages, so the fact that it can run anything at all is very impressive. And hopefully it continues to be developed and we get, it will eventually be able to run those AAA titles in a few years' time. Now, not to be outdone, of course, we have the founder of RPCS3, the hugely popular PlayStation 3 emulator, now working on a PS4 emulator called RPCS4. Now, we don't have a lot of information about this yet, but there has been some footage shown of a basic 2D graphics test running through the emulator, which was posted by the RPCS3 Twitter page. So that is in the works. It'll probably be, again, a few years off before we actually get a version that's usable. But it is great to see that, there is work being done on these emulators. And there are some other emulator projects out there as well, like PS4 Delta and GPCS4. I think a lot of those are not really active anymore. So yeah, that's basically it there. So one other thing is that there's also a fake emulator going around called PCSX4, which obviously is designed to sound very similar to the very popular PlayStation 2 emulator, PCSX2 and PCSX for PlayStation 1. And yeah, this is a completely fake emulator. It does not exist. Essentially, it is probably just a scam or just a way of getting ad revenue through survey downloads. Essentially, it's just showing fake footage of, you know, games running on an actual PS4 or PS5, and then, you know, just overlaying fake, you know, GPU percentage numbers and fake FPS counters and stuff like that on top. So yeah, definitely don't fall for that. There's no way that any PS4 emulation, apart from the emulation that the PS5 has built in, apart from that, there's no other emulation that's good enough to run AAA PS4 games as well as PCSX4 are claiming. Obviously, the real emulators are Spine, RPCS4, and Orbital, not PCSX4. That is completely fake, so please avoid that at all costs. So yeah, anyway, that's it for this PS4 update. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want me to do more of these videos to keep you guys updated on some of the other developments going on in the PlayStation 4 modding scene, then do let me know. Hope you guys enjoyed the video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video.